even though like Alcoholics Anonymous' primary purpose is to help people recover from alcoholism, there's a lot of intricacies with everyone. What about if someone loses a loved one and they talk about that in the meeting, So there's meeting people where they're at. You met me where I'm at and where I was at. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has always done. You know what I mean? Like, who did I reach out to in my crisis when I didn't have mental health care? I reached out to people who were going to talk to me at midnight. And that's what I tell the newcomer. Call me if you feel like drinking. And if you still feel like drinking after you talk to an alcoholic, go drink. You know what I mean? Because I bet you're not going to want to drink after that if you're really sincere about quitting alcohol.
I heard it through the grapevine.
Welcome. It's the AA Grapevine half-hour variety hour featuring the collected voices of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm Don, an alcoholic in Greensboro, North Carolina.
And I'm Sam, an alcoholic in Palm Springs, California.
What you say, Sam?
Hey, Mr. Donnie, it's been a minute.
It has. Why do we put this extra little S in there when we talk to each other?
I don't know, because I just feel like talking with a stupid voice when I talk to you.
I know. Something's about the way you look, Sam.
I will cut you.
Nothing personal. Sam, what do you think when you hear this beautiful bit of alliteration? Periodical postage paid at Plattsburgh.
The new grapevine is here! The new grapevine is here! Woo-hoo! Hey! Who let the chaos monkeys out?
I did. Any excuse.
Well, I know.
In this month's issue, our editor writes, "Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Such is the hope our big book promises for the newly sober alcoholic. And this is certainly true for AA's youngest members. This month's special section features inspiring stories by members who got sober early. They're learning to live full, happy lives."
In the story Never Too Young, a woman discovers she loves young people's AA events, hits the road, and never looks back.
So she sets on the road to young people's events and never goes home again.
I mean, I get the attraction. Those events are on fire.
Yeah. In Sober at 16, a teen drinks to escape the world until one day a guy named Steve shows him he doesn't have to hurt anymore.
Woohoo! Go Steve!
Yeah.
A young Army soldier stationed in Panama finds his AA fellows in Operation Sobriety. And in Soaking in the Sun, a young woman celebrates her new life with her sober crew on rooftops, dance floors, and at the beach. That's the way to do it.
It is. In the photo section, if walls could talk, and you know I love the photo section, Sam.
I do.
Yeah.
You're all about the paint and the artwork, etc.
That's right. There's a picture of a meeting space in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, the Old Faithful group. So I was traveling back in the early days of my sobriety. This was in the early 90s. We stayed for a week at Yellowstone. Actually, we got stuck there because my son got sick. It became kind of stressful. And I was at one point going, man, I really need to get to a meeting, I was talking to people on the telephone. So I went and looked up on the bulletin board at the main office there, looked and said, Friends of Bill.
Which is code language. You find that on cruise ships, too.
Yes. And that would be Bill W., our founder, Friends of Bill. It was at cabin 14. So I got a map, drove to cabin 14, which is they have cabins where people who work there live. Drove up, and there was about 3 guys hanging around outside, and they had red plastic cups, I was like, oh, okay, they could be an AA meeting, but there was something off about the way that they looked, and I saw
standing there with cups, probably smoking some cigarettes.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
So it could be a meeting, could not be a meeting. So I hollered out the window, "Are you Friends of Bill?" And one of the guys whipped around and said, "Who the
bleepity bleep
is Bill?" Obviously, it wasn't an AA meeting.
I don't know. I've been to some meetings.
They weren't, so I didn't hang around. So I'm glad to know that there is now the Old Faithful group.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm gonna check that out. I'm on the right side of the country to where I can get there a little more easily now.
Yeah.
There's a photo from the Ham on Rye meeting in North Greece, New York. You have to wonder what their meeting format is. Hey, somebody from Ham on Rye, contact us.
Please. We want to
Yes.
hear from the Ham on Rye group.
I bet they laugh a lot
Yeah, I'll bet they do.
and shake their heads because all the jokes are really bad dad, alcoholic dad jokes.
Just the way we like them.
Do you ever wonder what happened at the 74th General Service Conference last April? You can listen to our interview with Tommy, Season 7, Episode 5, released on July 29th.
Or you can read the news section in the front of the September issue. There's a short recap.
Don, as always, the first of the month, today's guest is a Grapevine author in this month's issue.
Yeah.
He wrote High Fives. His story's on page 22 of the September 2024 issue, and we welcome Andrew M. from Tucson, Arizona.
Well, this is going to be good.
What are the Grapevine's most popular books? Emotional Sobriety 1 and 2. Both are filled with experiences by sober AA members, many with long-term sobriety, about the positive transformations we can achieve by practicing the principles of the program in all aspects of our lives. The stories show how the rewards are serenity, emotional balance, and an increased joy for living. Visit aagrapevine.org/books.
My name is Andrew, and I'm an alcoholic from Tucson, Arizona. Bear Down, Arizona. That's the University of Arizona. So Wildcat fans here. It's Wildcat country right now.
Right. You're a wildcat.
Yes.
Tell us about how you came to AA.
So I came to AA when I was 18. I was where they have the grippy socks. And for those who don't know what the grippy socks are, that means they give you a lot of meds. And the AA meeting came in. I was like, aren't you scared of us? And they're like, no, we have the higher power. So I was like, okay. So that was my first introduction to AA.
So you were in a treatment center.
Yeah, I was in a treatment. Well, I was in a psych ward, but yeah, you can call it
Okay.
a treatment center, you know.
All right.
But it was interesting because I went to a sober living when I was 18 and I didn't stay sober, but the message was planted. So when I was 20 years old, I got really drunk. I had to go to work the next day. I stayed at work for like 7 hours and then I wanted to throw up. So of course, the boss was like, I'll give you one more chance. And you know that alcoholic card, like, are you an alcoholic? When I was 18, I may have clicked one off. But after that night, I clicked all of them off. I was there and I got on my knees and I prayed. I was like, I need help because I'm tired of living this unmanageable life and I haven't had a drink since. And my sobriety date is 1/13/13, the day after my 20th birthday. And then I went to AA.
So what was it like walking into that AA meeting?
I'm originally from Burbank, California, so I went to a meeting near Olive Park. I wonder if it's still there, but they wouldn't let you speak unless you had 24 hours of sobriety.
Yeah.
So I had to wait a day. So I did, and I spoke, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Fast forward, I did a couple steps. I did the 1, 2, 3 waltz.
All right.
3 years into my sobriety, when I was really dry, my life was getting really unmanageable. I thought about drinking again. And then I found my sponsor who was at a young people's meeting. And then I started working the steps because just because I stopped drinking doesn't mean like everything got better. I was able to go to college, get a degree, but I had that spiritual void still.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the first year. Didn't you feel like you're too young to get sober? Like maybe you overreacted?
Yes, totally. I told my outpatient counselor that I'm gonna go drink. I just have a marijuana problem, because I had a medical marijuana card,
Okay. What got through to you and when that, wait a minute, I'm an alcoholic?
When I couldn't work, that was the last straw. When I was like, I'm so intoxicated from the night before. And a customer had to help me do my job at the movie theater. And my whole drinking career, the first time I ever drank, It was at my friend's house. They asked me how much I had to drink. I said I lost count after my 10th beer. So the physical allergy, as soon as I started drinking, I got drunk.
It was on.
That was on, exactly. I slept over at my friend's house, and then the next day, my mom asked me, she's like, "What did you do at your friend's house?" I said, "I studied, I'm going to go to college." And she's like, "Why don't you look in the bathroom mirror, Andrew? You got something." And someone drew a very delicate penis on my face. So I don't think my mom believed me that I was studying last night.
So you were the first one to pass out, because my understanding is that what happens.
I was the first one to pass out.
And you end up with a temporary tattoo.
Yeah, so they drew on me,
So it's unmanageable, but just because my drinking was unmanageable was not enough to make me willing to quit. For me, it was just the psychic pain of continuously trying to control my drinking and failing at it. And then that's the unmanageability, I guess, you're talking about. But, I mean, can you describe what was going on inside of you? Because just the boss gives you another chance and you go, okay, I've got a problem, I quit. Seems like not enough.
So you want to know the juice. You want to get down and dirty.
I want to know the psychic terror.
Okay.
Just describe the psychic terror, that's all.
Just tell us your demons.
Yeah, just it's like a session, So anywho, my thing was I'm a usually pretty talkative person. You can ask anyone in Tucson, Arizona. This guy is hyper. But when I drank, I got really quiet. Like everything shut off. And I chased that every single day. And the thing is, I couldn't drink every day. You know what I mean? But I looked forward to every time I could get drunk.
It was on your mind regardless.
Oh, yeah. It was an obsession, because it quieted the mind. It quieted the nerves. I was more confident with women. I didn't really care about what people think. I didn't really care about my life. So like it says, we can't not differentiate the true from the false. My false life is I have to live the rest of my life intoxicated around the clock in order to function, because alcohol was my higher power. That was my solution to my problems. When I was happy, I drank. When I was sad, I drank. When a lady didn't show up to the date, I was like, oh, I'm getting drunk. If she did show up to the date, hey, let's go get drunk,
Yeah. Anything worth doing is worth doing drunk.
Yes.
That was what was going on with me. My mother was concerned about me and asked me about it at one point. I remember saying to her, this is the only thing that makes life tolerable.
Yes, it's the only thing that makes sense. That was my medicine,
Yeah.
I wasn't thriving. I was just surviving. And my only coping strategy was drinking alcohol. Yeah.
So alcohol turned on you, quit working, and you wanted to get out of it. So was there anything that AA asked you to do when you came in that you thought, well, this is a little drastic?
Of course, being 20 years old in Burbank, California, we can talk about, we're going to need another episode, They wanted me to do the steps.
What's one of the first thing in the steps that you went,
All the ones that had God in it. I was like, what? What's God going to do for me? Because I thought like the higher power never did anything for me. I was picked on, all this stuff. Like if God loved me, why did he make me an alcoholic? Why did he give me a mental disorder? My dad says I play the professional victim, and I think as an alcoholic, I'll just speak for me. I can't speak for you two. I am a professional
You're speaking
victim,
for Don, too.
You're speaking for me. And you're speaking for Sam, too.
Hey,
we don't like to call ourselves that, but we'll call each other victims.
But the seed was planted, too. Like when I was going to meetings in my 20s, I looked at the differences, not the similarities. I was like, oh, I never got a DUI. But some people do. So then when I moved to Tucson, Arizona, I couldn't keep a job and I was dry. I realized that when I was putting groceries away at my parents' house and there was alcohol, it was like Lord of the Rings, my precious. Like I needed that. I was like, uh-oh, this thought is not going away. This is not going to go away. This is going to get worse because I know the last time I had this obsession, what happened. And then that's when I was willing to go to any lengths to get over my alcoholism.
And those lengths were getting a sponsor and working the
Yes.
steps. Because, the fellowship is what gets us sober. That is what helped me stay sober for 8 months before I got a sponsor. But what I learned is I needed to work the program of recovery, the 12 steps, in order to find a solution to keep me sober. I got sober
Exactly.
because the fellowship was holding me up. I
Mm-hmm.
stay sober because I've worked this program and continue to, and I have the tools and the relationship with a higher power, whatever that may or may not be, and I'm sober.
So, Andrew, can you describe something that happened to you that changed your mind about the idea of God in the steps?
I knew where the solution was. I just wasn't ready to ask for the solution. I had a lot of pride and I didn't want to ask for help. But something my sponsor told me recently that I kind of always believed, my higher power is kind of like a river, you know? When I'm doing God's will, I'm flowing with the current. But when I'm not doing God's will, I'm swimming against the current. And I told my sponsor, I like to swim against the current a lot. And he was like, exactly. So when I stopped swimming against the current, I was like, I can't do this on my own anymore. My best line of thinking has got me right back to the point where my life is so unmanageable in dry variety, that a drink sounds good. And I know where a drink's going to get me: death, institutions, or prison. So that was kind of the breaking moment right there when I was like, the obsession has come back because I haven't worked all the steps. And if you want the obsession to go away, it says in the 10 step promises that you're placed in a position of neutrality. But I had to do the work before I got to the 10 steps. So that was the answer. My life was too unmanageable. I was in enough pain to where I needed something greater than me to restore me back to sanity. That's step 2 for those who have done the steps.
You worked the steps. Is there something that has shown up since having worked them the first time?
Well, I worked the steps with my 19-year-old sponsor. I was 23 and I had more sobriety than he did too. That's the ego. I have to have a little ego in this. So, anywho, he had like 3 years of sobriety and I had 4 years of sobriety
Oh,
at that point. So we were working the steps. I started sponsoring people, but what really stuck out, how it works, it says there are those two who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover. They have the capacity to be honest. So I thought, hey, if I work the steps, I won't have to get on my meds that I've been off for 5 years. But that was not the case. I was sponsoring 4 people and I was working an overnight shift at a foster care place. And I kind of got a little wacky. When I say little wacky, like I was disrupting the AA meetings. People were concerned for my safety. I got fired from that job. And here's how I knew the power of God. I called my friend, who's now my sponsor, and I said, I need help. They met me for coffee at like midnight. The place was closed. We were in the parking lot. And it's good you show up with 2 people to a 12-step call, because if my sponsor just showed up, I would have fought him. But he brought the craziest guy who knows jujitsu. So there's no way I could kick both their butts. I knew that, even though I thought like I just saved the United States from a nuclear war with North Korea. I had enough sense to know it's not the fight in the dog, it's the spirit of the dog. But I knew so anywho, long story short, I learned that I needed to take care of my mental health with a little outside help. It says on page 133 in the big book, you should never belittle a good psychiatrist or psychologist. So that's something that opened my eyes, that I need to take outside medication. It's called an antipsychotic. If you don't want me showing up psychotic to meetings, make sure you put that anti first. So, and real quick, something I really love is people come to me in AA because they know I've done the work. They know I go to counseling. They know I see that. So when they see people that they're sponsoring going through psychosis or something like that, they know, hey, Andrew's a pretty good guy to talk to about that stuff.
My openness about my life experience is what enables me to be of service to other people in this fellowship.
mm-hmm.
And other people knowing about it lets them help me connect with other people who need it.
My
Yeah.
weaknesses and that I have overcome them end up being the most useful thing I have.
Oh, exactly. Your greatest weakness can become your greatest strength.
Yeah.
That's it. You mentioned going to some YPA meetings, young people in AA meetings. Why did you go there?
Because they had this conference called ASCIIPAW, the Arizona State Conference of Young People in AA. and they're like, Andrew, you got to go to this conference. And they had this sobriety countdown. I love the YPAW sobriety countdowns.
Yes.
I know your state conferences are pretty good, but YPAW's young people's countdowns are wild. Like that's
Yeah.
the only time I get to be as a Looney Tune as I can possibly be, and no one's going to judge me.
The Chaos Monkeys are released.
Yeah. So it's really cool to see someone with like 45 years of sobriety. I'm like, that's wild. And then to see the person with like 24 hours go up to get a big book from someone with the most amount of time, and everyone's yelling, keep coming back, keep coming. Like you can feel the energy. That's like, we don't shoot our wounded. And that's what made me interested in YPOD.
I love hearing that.
Well, Andrew, what's your recovery like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, sometimes I go to a big book study, but my home group is 801 Southside Presbyterian Church. We're an open discussion meeting.
What does home group mean to you?
Home group means you have a position there. If you don't show up for a meeting, people are going to call you and say, where are you? You show up to that meeting, because when I was the coffee person for that meeting, I thought about drinking, but I was like, wait a minute, AA is going to know because they're not going to have their coffee and they're going to be resentful of me. So my paranoia kept me sober. I was like, no, I got to commit me.
Yeah, I've heard that put that you've
Yeah.
got to walk through these commitments to drink.
Yes.
And so taking commitments protects me from drinking.
Yeah, and to fast forward a little bit, I talked about my mental health and how my friends made sure I got to the crisis response network, when I was in crisis 7 years ago. But now with the YPAWs, they've asked me to be on mental health panels. I've traveled throughout the Southwest, and that's been pretty cool. But now it's like I sponsor people who have that now. So it's just, and they're young too, they're like, hey, how do I get over a dual diagnosis, So
AA absolutely supports working with the medical community.
yes.
Yeah.
It's never something that AA has said, no, you shouldn't be taking meds, you shouldn't be doing this or anything. That is not the message of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Although I have heard old timers who feel like the steps will solve every problem. And it's like you need to get off all your meds. And that's not what it says in the literature.
That makes me chuckle when that happens. No one in Tucson has told me to get off my medication. That's how loony I was. Everyone was pro Andrew getting on some puppy downers. I've heard that at other, like I remember going to the All California White Paw Conference in San Diego last summer, and one of the mental health speakers there said, yeah, her sponsor wouldn't sponsor her unless she got off all her meds, and she wasn't willing to do that. Yeah, it's just really interesting, because I was sponsoring 4 people before I went back to a mental hospital, and they all fired me because they couldn't tell the difference between me being drunk or psychotic. You really can't tell the difference. A lot of people are going to think you relapsed. You just love on them old timers. You know what I mean? We'll use them for the sobriety conference. They can stand, say, hey, you can get this amount of time if you do what we do. And you bring up a really good point too, because sometimes my sponsor might say something that hurts my feelings, but I love my sponsors. All the sponsors I've had, I've really loved them. I made amends to one for firing him because he didn't want me to quit my job. That's a loving guy. And what I tell my sponsor now, here's our big argument now. He doesn't want me to move back in with my parents because he wants me to be self-supporting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I make enough to do that, but I like saving money, if you can save more money. So I told him, hey, I like 99.9% of the things you say. I'm not going to dwell on that 0.1% that I don't. And I'm not going to fire a sponsor every couple of years because they're getting too honest with me. I've done that in my sobriety. So I just want that out there too.
Yeah. So, Andrew, when you start sponsoring someone, what does that look like?
It starts off like a conversation. Where are they at? I share my experience, strength, and hope, what it was like, what happened, what it like now. And then I hear them. I don't have a good batting average with sponsees. I'm not responsible for you staying sober, just like I'm not responsible for you getting drunk. And even if they don't complete all the steps with me, just like with me at 18 or 20, the seed has been planted. And like you said, I'm going to reiterate what you said. The fellowship can get you in the rooms, can keep you sober for a little while, but eventually you're going to have to walk the road we've all walked or whatever transportation you have, right?
That's it. There's got to be a solution that's employed. And it's a good time for us to acknowledge that, AA is not the only way. There are other solutions out there, but this has worked for me. It sounds like it's worked for you, and I know it's worked for Don.
This works for us.
Yes. And one of the things I wanted to mention, man, I wouldn't probably say this the first time I see somebody, but getting help for outside issues is really, really important because we probably all know that there have been people who've ended their life in sobriety, and I, as a lived experience, have suffered with that. And I remember right before I moved out of my parents' house, I was really like suicidal. And I told my parents, you got to leave for this therapy session because it's on Zoom. Y'all got to go for an hour. I don't care where you go, but you got to go. And it's kind of like I did a fourth and fifth step with my therapist on my mental health. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And it just went away, because my therapist didn't say you have to go back to the hospital. Because if she would do that constantly when I would talk to her about that, I'd stop telling her. You know what I mean? So she was there for me in my most vulnerable point to the point where I don't have it as often. But she also says, with what you have, Andrew, those thoughts are going to come out just like your fleeting thoughts of drinking. You have this illness, but you handle it better. So I'm saying I'm a living testament of what good mental health recovery is. And I hope someone who's listening to this podcast sees that, hopefully you get the help that I got because it's amazing. I have an amazing relationship with my therapist. I don't go to my parents for my mental health anymore. They're the last people I go to for mental health advice now because I've taken ownership of that, just like I've taken ownership of my alcoholism. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's difficult with a dual diagnosis because you got two diseases telling you that you're okay.
Yes.
You don't need it.
Yeah.
But quit either one and you're in trouble. I wanted to say that we're out of line when we give medical advice to people. That falls with the traditions, and we have a primary purpose to carry the message to the alcoholics still. So we focus and have a solution for alcoholism,
Mhm.
not for other things. And then the other thing is Tradition 10, AA has no opinion on outside issues. So as a sponsor, I don't really need to have an opinion on outside issues.
Well, I want to hear what Sam has to say about that.
So Alcoholics Anonymous is in the business of helping people get sober and stay sober. We have a history of cooperation with the medical community. I think there is an implied agreement that seeking outside help is a good idea if there are other issues going on in your life. Listen, mental health is healthcare. If my leg is snapped in two, I'm not going to go to an AA meeting to fix it. And I've gone through this, and I have had mental health care. If my brain is telling me alcohol and drugs, that's not a solution anymore. So really the only way for you to stop feeling this is to kill yourself. I'm not going to go to an AA meeting solely. Now, I may go to an AA meeting and share about it and be open with my friends and peers in there, but I'm going to get medical help for this thing because AA is not psychiatric health care.
Bingo. You said it beautifully. I almost had tears running down my eyes because I feel like the younger generation's getting heard. Like I really hope that gets recorded because I was worried. I was fearful. I was like, how am I going to have this coffee conversation and hit the subjects that I know that I'm passionate about? But you're both right. And that's what's beautiful about Alcoholics Anonymous. But yeah, mental health stuff is an outside issue. But if you're having those outside issues, go seek that help. So because we're going to visit enough funerals or celebrations of life in AA, I don't want to go to yours. I'd rather you get help and then help someone else out who needs that lived experience and say, hey, this is what I did. You know what I mean? It might help you out,
And this is what I did. Those words are so powerful in how we help each other in AA. And here's how it turned out.
It's always my experience.
Yeah. Andrew, you wrote a story that got published in the Grapevine. Was that hard to do?
It was a little bit. I had a little help. Anonymous friend helped me edit it. It's an honor and a privilege. It was hard, but once I let it go, once I started to swim with the current, I got this email like a year later saying, "Hey, we want you on the podcast. We published your story. You're going to get something mailed to you." That's kind of how it works. I don't think it's an accident that I moved out of my parents' house. I'm sponsoring people. I'm working full time. I'm doing all these things that I always dreamed of that Alcoholics Anonymous got me to because I've continued to work the steps as honestly as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I want to throw out there, folks, if you don't have an anonymous friend who can help you edit your story, don't worry about it. The editors at the Grapevine will do that also. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
No, this is great. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
The Grapevine strives to be self-supporting.
Please subscribe to the magazine or app and visit the Grapevine online store.
The app is free in your phone's app store and has great content and features provided at no cost to you.
But if you subscribe, you get so much more. And you support all things Grapevine, including this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Only $2.99 a month.
The pessimist told me.
The glass is half empty.
The optimist told me.
The glass is half full.
Then my sponsor told me.
There's more in the refrigerator along with a freshly made sandwich, and don't forget to wash the glass and plate when you're done. It's really not that funny.
Please listen closely as our options have changed.
Thanks for joining us. The AA Grapevine Half Hour Variety Hour is posted every Monday and is produced by AA Grapevine, Inc. We don't speak for AA as a whole. We share the experience, strength, and hope of members to help others recover from alcoholism. All things Grapevine are available at aagrapevine.org, including our app and how to get in touch with us. Find us on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to know more about AA, visit aa.org or search online for Alcoholics Anonymous and your city.
That was freaking adequate.
Put that in.